The hub world orbiting Cygnus 13 was not built for comfort. It was built to remind. The steel walls gleamed with the sterility of bureaucracy, and the ceilings hung high enough to dwarf any species beneath them, reminding each delegate they served something larger than themselves. Power. Empire. Order. Captain Elias Voss walked its halls like a scar cutting through marble. He no longer wore medals. Just a threadbare, charcoal-gray Terran officer's coat, one shoulder torn from an old plasma burn. His gait was slow but deliberate. The limp in his right leg was subtle, a souvenir from the trenches of Orion 9. His eyes, pale blue and bloodshot, swept across the assembly floor. The Galactic Council chamber unfolded before him like a theater carved from polished obsidian. Dozens of alien species lined the tiers, the insectinocrine, chittering through translation drones, the silicon-skinned Sarazi, motionless statues of indifference, the feather-crested Saraxi, whispering through warble songs. All turned to him. Some with disdain. Others with curiosity. A few with caution. At the center, under the dome of stars, stood Archon Valkareth, tall, silver-scaled, and wrapped in the crimson regalia of the Izari Empire. He smiled without warmth. "Captain Voss," he said, voice smooth as glass, "humanity sends its relics to speak for it. Are we to interpret this as a sign of desperation?" Voss didn't answer immediately. He stepped forward, the silence amplifying his presence more than any retort could. When he spoke, his voice was gravel and gravity. "No. You're to interpret this as a warning." A murmur stirred through the chamber. One of the Saraxi fluttered its wings nervously. Valkareth's smile twitched. "The Accord violated expansion treaties, settlements in disputed zones, unauthorized jump lanes. Disputed because your fleets moved in behind the ink on the armistice hadn't even dried." Voss cut in. "Don't pretend peace ever suited you." Valkareth's fingers flexed, claws twitching under velvet sleeves. "The galaxy needs order, Captain. Chaos favors no species. Chaos," Voss said, "was your gift to us." He paused, not for effect, but because a memory caught him in its jaws. Siege of Vega Prime. 30 years ago. They'd been outnumbered 12-1. Voss remembered the way the orbital bombardments lit the clouds red, the hiss of air leaking from a punctured helmet, the stench of scorched flesh that clung to skin like oil. He was a field commander then, nothing more. His company had fortified a mining shaft, converting drills into rail guns, welding hull fragments into makeshift bunkers. They fought off wave after wave, Izari shock troops, drone swarms, atmospheric shrapnel storms. For 6 days they didn't sleep. Half-starved, bleeding, hallucinating. On the 7th, Corporal Juno Bex rigged herself with explosives and launched out of a decompression lock. She struck the Empire's siege cruiser mid-jump. The blast tore a hole through its ventral shields. Her body was never recovered. But her scream, Voss still remembered. Back in the chamber, he exhaled slowly. "You assume because we've stayed quiet for 70 years, we've grown soft. Comfortable. That's your first mistake. The second is thinking a second war will end differently." Valkareth's expression didn't change, but his eyes narrowed. "Your people lost over 1 billion lives last time. The next war will erase you." Voss stepped onto the center dais, letting the lights burn against the scars on his face. "Then you better hope you're not alive to see how we fight when we know there's no tomorrow." Around them, silence settled heavy. Counselor Ventharuk of the Thalaryu clicked his mandibles, uncertain. "Earth is not what it was during the Orion Wars. Nor is the Empire. We should consider negotiation." Valkareth turned, voice sharp. "They understand only force. Negotiation delays the inevitable." Voss's eyes locked on him. "You're right. It is inevitable. Not because we want war, but because you refuse to accept peace that isn't built on your boots pressed to our throats." The Archon's facade cracked for a heartbeat. "You overestimate your species." Voss took a step closer, voice low. "And you underestimate what a cornered species becomes when it learns it can bleed gods." No rebuttal came. Hours later, Voss sat alone in his quarters, eyes glazed over lines of intelligence reports scrolling across the display wall. Colony raids. Disappearances. Unexplained, warp surges near the Sol border. One report stood out: encrypted distress signals from Kestrel Station, a civilian outpost on the fringe. The Council would do nothing. The Empire had already started. A ping blinked on the comms board. He answered. The face of Admiral Lyra Voss, his daughter, flickered into view, tight bun, dark eyes, and a steel resolve he remembered from her mother. Status? He asked. All fleet groups at 80%. Civilians moving to shelters. AI command uplinks testing green. Her voice dropped. We're running drills under blackout protocols. If they hit us, we won't get another first move. Voss nodded, jaw tight. How are morale? She hesitated. They're angry. Focused. And waiting. You afraid? Lyra looked at him. Only of how far we'll go if we have to. He didn't respond. The screen went dark. He pulled a worn leather pouch from his coat. Inside, a tarnished medal, the Orion Flame, awarded posthumously to his wife, Commander Rayla Voss. She died leading a last stand during the defense of Mars' orbital ring. He ran a thumb over the etched inscription on the back. We are what remains, he whispered, almost to the void. I came here to stop the next war. But maybe it never stopped. The next morning, Voss walked back into the council chamber. Valkaris stood waiting. You still believe words will stop us? No, Voss said simply. But maybe they'll outlive you. And with that, he stepped onto the floor once more, not as a diplomat, but as the last war's ghost returned to warn the living. Voss had fought on more worlds than he could name, but nothing ever felt as hollow as peace in the shadow of war. The council chambers sat in cold silence that morning, its obsidian walls echoing with tension left unsaid. Outside the viewport, the dying star Cygnus 13 pulsed in crimson flares, casting long red shadows across the war-weary lines in his face. A silent war had already begun. The politicians just hadn't accepted it yet. Inside his quarters, Voss reviewed the latest reports. He scrolled past the sanitized words. Incident, unidentified engagement. Presumed accident, all masking what they really were. Attacks. Probes. Testing Earth's patience. A mining colony in the Kestrel belt had gone dark. 57 workers. No distress beacon. No debris. Just silence. He sat back in his chair and stared at the screen. His hand instinctively went to the silver disc hanging around his neck, a chip his wife once encoded with old Mars lullabies for their daughter. He hadn't played them in decades. Maybe soon he'd need to. A soft chime broke the silence. "Com incoming," the ship's AI said. "Encrypted. High priority. Patch it through." The air shimmered. A hologram of Admiral Lyra Voss came into view, battle-dressed, her dark eyes steeled beneath the glow of tactical displays. "Dad," she said simply. Voss gave a slight nod. "Status? We're tight. Fleet groups are deployed on rotation. No offensive action yet, but if they blink wrong, we light the sky. And morale? Ready. Tense. They're watching everything. Pilots sleep in their suits." She paused. "The younger ones? They're angry. They've seen the footage from Kestrel. They want to hit back." "They will," Voss said quietly. "But not first." A silence passed between them. Neither one filled it with false hope. Lyra finally said, "They're going to force our hand. You know that." Voss nodded. "And they think that's to their advantage." He leaned forward. "You remember the story your mother told you about the fox and the storm?" "Yeah," she said. "Fox waits. Storm passes. Fox doesn't." "Exactly. Stay ready. And Lyra, don't hesitate when it comes. Do what you have to." Her expression hardened. "I will." The image faded. Voss stood and approached the window. Below, the cold void stretched across 1,000 light-years of indifferent space. Somewhere beyond that blackness, fleets were moving. His thoughts drifted to Mars. 34 years ago. Orbit above Mars. The red planet bled fire. The orbital defense ring was failing. Enemy cruisers cut through its steel arms like blades through cloth. Voss and Rayla had held command of the last bastion, a rotating platform armed with outdated kinetic guns and patched-together shields. Rayla had stood beside him, face pale but calm, issuing orders between cannon fire and hull breaches. Her voice, even then, was steady. "We hold here," she'd said. "We hold so Earth doesn't burn next." When the end came, she stayed behind. Voss had been forced onto an escape shuttle, blood streaking his temple, screaming her name as the ring detonated. She never made it off. Her sacrifice saved 20 million lives. That night became his silence. The present pulled him back like a gravity well. He left his quarters and walked the length of the council ring, entering a side corridor sealed to public access. Inside, a dim-lit chamber housed a table shaped like a crescent moon. Around it, 4 other figures waited, non-Empire delegates, neutral or quietly opposed to Izari control. Counselor Yenaryu of the Aquatic Kairoth Alliance folded her scaled arms. "You've been quiet, Terran." "I don't make noise until I need to," Voss replied. Counselor Drac of the Minari Horde, hulking and horned, grunted. "You asked for this meeting? Speak." Voss set a holopad on the table. It activated, casting footage, shredded Terran colony structures, silent skies, and the orbital path of an Izari battleship lingering just outside treaty range. "The Empire's already at war," he said. "They're hoping we'll beg for peace again. They don't realize what we've become." Yenaryu eyed him. "And what is that, human?" Voss didn't smile. "Ready." There was silence. "Are you asking for open support?" Drac rumbled. "No," Voss said. "Not yet. But if your ships go missing on the border, if supplies end up in Terran ports, I'll remember who our friends are." The delegates exchanged looks. No one committed. But no one walked out either. It was enough for now. Hours later, Voss stood once more at the edge of the council chamber. He watched the delegates file in, some bored, some wary, some smug. Valkareth entered last, flanked by Izari war priests and adorned in ceremonial bone thread. His eyes locked on Voss. "You keep trying to stir ghosts," the Archon said. "No," Voss replied. "I'm reminding you they're real." Valkaretha's voice sharpened. "Peace is the Empire's gift. Spit on it, and you choose extinction." Voss stepped close enough that only the Archon could hear his whisper. "I lost everything in your last gift. My wife. My home. My youth. You're not giving peace. You're packaging obedience." Valkaretha's golden eyes narrowed. "Your kind always believed sacrifice made you noble. It only made you extinct slower. You mistake surviving for slowing," Voss said. "You'll see the difference soon enough." The council session began. Speeches followed, posturing, deflection, scripted outrage. Voss listened, arms crossed, eyes scanning the crowd. The Empire was tightening the noose. But they didn't realize humanity had already stepped outside the loop. Halfway through the session, a notification blinked on his data implant. Encryption key, Theta class. Source, Sol Defense Command. He opened it behind a thought-triggered firewall. Turing Scout 92 destroyed. Final ping registered Izari warp signature. No survivors. Voss stared at the line for a moment, not blinking. Then he closed it. Later, in solitude, he lit a match. The flame flickered against a strip of aged paper, a Terran tradition long forgotten by most. On it was the names of 32 soldiers from Vega Prime. He added a 33rd. Scout Crew 92, lost, not forgotten. The flame consumed the paper slowly. Voss watched until the last ember died. The final council session opened under a storm of silence. Tensions clung to the air like static before lightning. Delegates sat rigid in their seats. Hushed tones passed between aides, but no one spoke above a whisper. Something had shifted, an unspoken understanding that the floor beneath them was cracking. Then Voss entered. He wasn't wearing his diplomat's coat. Instead, he stepped onto the central platform clad in a faded black exosuit, old Terran Navy issue, battle-worn and functional. Its shoulder plate bore a single insignia, a white flame encircling a broken chain. Not a symbol of conquest. A symbol of survival. Gasps scattered through the chamber. Not because of the armor, but because of what it meant. This was no longer a negotiation. Valkareth rose from his dais, arms folded. His expression was unreadable, but the edges of his mouth curled in contempt. You arrived dressed for battle, not discourse. Is that how humanity pleads for peace now? In costume? Voss didn't move to the podium. He didn't need it. No, he said. This isn't a plea. His voice rang out across the chamber, raw and clear. It's a reminder of what happens when you corner something that remembers how to fight. No one interrupted. Voss turned slowly, addressing not just Valkareth, but every counselor, every scribe, every recording drone. You want to call this a crisis? Let me show you what that word really means. He raised a small hologram disc and tapped it. Images projected into the air, footage from the Orion Wars. Not sanitized history, but raw field transmissions. Human Marines sprinting through zero-G debris fields. Medics using their own blood plasma to keep wounded breathing. Starships burning silently as they split in half. A young woman crawling across a ruptured hull, detonator clutched to her chest. Corporal Bex. Vega Prime. She volunteered, Voss said quietly. We'd run out of drones. Out of ordnance. She became the weapon. You remember what that cruiser was carrying? He turned to Valkareth. 300 elite shock troopers. Gone. By one human who refused to die on her knees. The chamber remained frozen. He walked forward a step. Not a threat, an invitation. You call us savage. Unpredictable. Dangerous. He nodded once. You're right. But not because we want war. Not because we revel in destruction. It's because when we're faced with extinction, we do something most of you forgot how to do, we adapt. We break ourselves apart and rebuild into what the moment demands. More footage played, field engineers turning cargo lifters into artillery. Civilians forming resistance cells in irradiated ruins. Children helping reload plasma rifles in bunkers under fire. You think we've been dormant these last 70 years? You think we've grown soft? The only thing we've grown is patient. He pointed to the screen. A map of recent Izari fleet movements lit up, overlaid with warp trail evidence and neutral zone violations. We have the logs. The trajectories. You've already started this war. You just haven't admitted it. Valkareth finally spoke, voice cold. The Empire secures its interests. You chose to expand into territories not your own. The consequences will fall on you. Voss cut in. Because we're not asking for war. But we won't run from it either. Not this time. He let that hang. Then his voice dropped low, measured, unflinching. You want to control the galaxy. We just want to live in it. And that's why you'll lose. The silence broke as Counselor Yenaryu stood. This isn't a discussion anymore. It's a reckoning. Drak of the Minuri Horde rumbled in agreement. I remember the human burn worlds. You've been fools to forget. Valkareth raised a hand. This is a political circus. They dress their ghosts in armor and call it a threat. Voss turned to him. You fear ghosts because they don't follow your rules. They don't stop when you expect them to. They don't care about your hierarchy. You don't know how to kill what refuses to die. Valkareth leaned forward, voice stripped of diplomacy. Earth will be ashes before your kind draws breath again. Voss's reply was almost a whisper. Then you better hope your kind doesn't breathe long enough to see what rises from ours. The session devolved. Delegates shouted. Alliances cracked. Some stood with the Empire. Others walked out entirely. The ceasefire collapsed that instant, not with a declaration, but with a shared understanding. Diplomacy was dead. Hours later, Voss stood in the docking bay of the Defiant, A reactivated Dread-class Terran cruiser, its hull scarred but humming with new technology beneath the old steel. Engineers moved like silent ghosts, prepping weapons, calibrating systems, eyes focused but grim. He walked the length of the bridge, pausing at the viewport. Out in the black, Earth's orbit was no longer still. Terran fleets had risen. Dozens of vessels, sleek and quiet, formed arrowhead formations across orbital lanes. AI cores linked between flagships. Quantum relays pulsed as commands traveled silently through subspace. Humanity's war machine had not roared to life. It had awakened. Behind him, a young officer approached. "All commands synced, sir." "Orders?" Voss's voice was calm. "Stand by. No one fires until they do." The officer nodded. "Yes, sir." He returned to the viewport. In the distance, new warp signatures flared, Empire dreadnoughts emerging in staggered formations just outside Sol's defense boundary. Valkareth had made his choice. So had humanity. Voss raised the comm and opened a secure channel to Lyra. Her face appeared pale but determined. "They're here," he said. She nodded. "We're ready." There was a pause. Then she added, "Whatever happens, thank you." Voss exhaled, eyes steady. "Thank me later. If there's a later." The screen went dark. Voss stood alone for a moment longer, watching the stars shift. Not with fear. Not even with rage. With certainty.